What is going on, everyone? Welcome on into Open Ice Hits. We are going to start today's episode with a little bit of interesting drama in the NHL, something I probably would have never anticipated us talking about, and that's some officiating. That's right, the refereeing, and it looks like Tim Peel is not going to be doing much more business, skating around making calls, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to say annoyed by it, but I do think the reaction to it is exactly where we are in society in 2021, where, look, he ends up making a statement on a hot mic that there's going to be a makeup call in play. He wanted to make a call earlier in the game, so this one might be a little ticky-tack, and that's essentially the cliff notes of it all, and I just feel that the reaction to it is ridiculous. To think that, how many times do we watch a hockey game, Durso, and during the game we look around after a call and go, huh, that was a makeup call, or, ooh, they missed that one, and then later on there's a penalty that's a little weak, and you go, huh, that's a makeup call, and I just feel, okay, so you heard a ref admit that there's a makeup call. We knew that there have been makeup calls forever. That's just how sports has always gone down. So to now hear someone admit that it's actually happening, what does that change? We all knew that it was happening anyway. So that's kind of my original, just from the jump assessment on the situation. But how do you interpret it?
Well, it's a tough situation to completely interpret because, you're right. It's been part of the game forever. It feels like it just happens. You get these situations where you see one call, and especially when the words that we always use, we say, "Oh, that's a ticky-tack call. Why is that being made at this stage of the game? Why is it being made at all?" And then you kind of wait for the next one to come. Like I pretty much, there's not a game I go to anymore that I don't expect the penalties to even out at some point. If I see 2 or 3 early on, then I know that it's coming later for the other side usually. I mean, unless it's just that's the way the game flows and there's not something obvious, I guess, but that's just how it goes. I mean, first of all, if you're on a hot mic, don't say things like that. That'd be one thing,
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
obviously he didn't know the mic was hot, correct? I mean, it's not like he's like,
I,
"Hey, I
I,
know
I
I'm
guess, but
mic'd
if you're
up."
yeah, I guess, but if you're mic'd up, then just, I mean, they have their own dressing room and things like that too. I mean, hold that one for after the game or whatever it may be, don't admit it, I
What was
guess,
he, see?
but
I feel was he mic'd up, or was that just the mic that is on when you make a call and you are now on the broadcast and telling people the information? Like, maybe I'm wrong, but I didn't think he was mic'd up to the point where he knows that, hey, I'm mic'd up for some sort of special occasion. I thought it was more maybe something triggered when he's supposed to make a call, that microphone popped up.
yeah, I mean, well, look, here's the other thing about it too. My thought is actually just from hearing the clip, you can't see who he's talking to, right? In the clip, like you don't see anything. I assumed he was talking to the other official. I believe the story actually is he was talking to Roman Yossi, the captain of the Nashville Predators, that he was telling the player, I know it wasn't much, but I had to get a call in. That's like, and is admitting it to the player and the team. And I think Yossi said after the game, that was the explanation the bench got. So he told the bench too. Like, it just happened to be the wrong time. It got out over the air. Everybody heard it. I don't even know, like those mics that you're talking about where they make the announce and things like that. I don't even think they're hardwired into the actual broadcast. I think they're just loud enough in the arena that it sounds like they are. So I don't even know whose mic this could have been, that it would have been heard over a broadcast. Could it have been a hot mic that, not that they have a lot of guys between the benches anymore doing broadcasts, right? Not in this day and age right now, but could it have been that? Could it have been something anywhere? Who knows where it came from? But beside the point, it was heard. And I remember, I mean, we were texting about this before we did the show. And I even told you, I actually didn't watch the clip for several hours after it happened. I saw this thing floating around. I saw a lot of disgust about it being admitted, I guess. And I'm like, all right, at some point in time, I'm like, all right, I got to watch this thing. I got to see what it is. And I watched it and I heard the voice and I'm like, I can't place it right now, but I know the voice. And if I see who did the game, I'm going to be able to figure it out. And sure enough, I went over there and it's 2 veteran officials. It was Tim Peel and Kelly Sutherland were doing the game. And I know I can recognize both of their voices by now. I've been to enough games that they've officiated, watched enough games that they've officiated to know. I picked up on it right away. And it was surprising because it sounded like the type of thing that a younger ref would say, even though it was a veteran crew.
Well, that's why, see, and that's why I want to to just, I wonder, because this is where I need context of what's going on around the league. What if, and we don't know the information, but what if this is common? What if the veteran guys out there, they go up to the bench, they go up to Yossi? Because I didn't know that. You're right. When you mentioned apparently this was to the captain, this is to the team, it did sound as if he was talking to, hey, this is the other official. This is kind of what I'm calling here. Let's move forward. But what if this is standard? What if all these guys, Wes McCauley goes up and goes, you know what, this is a little bit weaker, but I thought I had one in the first that I made a mistake on. What if this is just common status quo, but we never hear it that way? So now I hate to go down this road, but is this a cancer culture type of move where this is standard, this is how it goes, and then when someone hears it actually, it's, oh, this is ridiculous, I can't believe it, this guy can't do another game, and then the reaction gets a little strong, that's all.
Well, I think they conveniently, it conveniently happened to a guy who was retiring. So it made it easy to say, okay, you had a month left, you're just done now. That's an easy cover-up, and I've seen a lot of people say that. There's two things that I kind of, as I've read some things about the situation that I didn't realize that might come into play. One is that I didn't realize that just about every other league and major professional league out there allows for the officials to be available to the media or to one member of the media, a pool reporter who gets, why was that call made? You can ask an umpire in baseball, why did you make that call? They get the official of an NFL game, let's say, something like that, right? The NHL is the only league that doesn't do that, the major ones, and doesn't provide a reason for why was that call made, why did it go this way, things like, things like that. So that's one thing. And then, I just think that it's not that it's an admission to anything, because like you said, I think we've known all along it's been like this to an extent, but is that covering up a bigger problem? That it is it's been part of the game, that they make these types of calls, and now we're just kind of actually hearing it come out of someone's mouth that this is how I call a game. You know what I mean? Like that it almost, like, now that it was actually said on a broadcast, heard, and the league is trying to take some form of action. It might be the very most simple form that they can right now, which is just addressing the one official, not the collective group that probably still does it no matter what. Does it lead to something beyond this? Like, there was a lot of opinion articles out there that I was seeing that are, well, okay, taking care of Tim Peel is one thing in this because you address it with the official who was on the microphone at that time. But this is a league-wide thing. So is it going to be addressed with the rest of the officials now about what you have to do?
I don't have that much of an issue with it. Maybe I'm the outlier. Maybe I'm the crazy one. But if you miss a call in the first, I'm not saying that you just call any little tic-tac slash here and there, even though that's the way they call it nowadays anyway. But I guess I don't have a problem personally. If there is a slash that you missed in the first, that wasn't the other game. There was that JVR slash. He was coming through the neutral zone, two-handed, whacked right out of his hands. He
right
had
out of his hands, right?
And they didn't call it. Now, if that was to happen in a first period, and then later on, mid-second, there was something that you could call, you might not have to call it. It's close, it's borderline, and the referee makes a decision, well, I didn't call it in the first, but this one, maybe I wouldn't have, but I did miss one earlier. I'm going to call this one. It's a little borderline, but I'll call it. I don't have a problem with that because you should have called the first one. This one could go either way. They escaped one last time. I'm not going to allow you to escape again, and I'm going to call it. I don't have an issue with a little bit of a makeup call. I think that kind of makes sense, actually.
I think that this is starting to become an issue of accountability. And we talk about accountability with players in the game and with the way that we hold players, coaches, et cetera, with results and things like that. I think it's becoming a thing of accountability because there's too many incidents now, not necessarily anything that's out of the ordinary in a game. It happens all the time, but I think that's exactly the problem. It happens all the time. A missed call here, a call that was made that evened things up later on and in a critical spot in a game, things like that. I think it happens too much, and that's why now people are going, well, there's an admission to why we see it the way that it is in today's game. You were laughing at me already for telling you I recognize the voice of the official on the clip. Yeah. So I'm really going to get you going here then because, okay, so pretty much anybody who watches the sport, especially as much as we do, but anybody who even remotely watches it probably knows who Wes McCauley is. Now, I'm going to go back a little further than this, though. So Wes McCauley did an interview, I think with Sportsnet, several years ago. and it's on YouTube. So I actually went back and found it because there was something in it that I knew was said that I'm like, it's important. Whatever it is, it's important to tie into how calls are made in the league. Because Wes McCauley's father, John McCauley, was an official as well, and eventually the head of officiating, all that type of stuff until he passed away. And he had apparently, like Wes says in the interview, that there was he found this note that his father had written, like with 3 bullet points of what an official not needs to do, but when it comes to making calls, it was call the major penalties, call the scoring chances, and call the one that everyone sees. And that kind of makes a lot of sense. Everybody's going to be kind of glued to a guy's got a shot to score a goal, make the call if you see it. If it's a major penalty, got to call it. If it's so obvious to everybody else in the building and on TV, make that call too. And I don't think there's enough officials that call the obvious ones that everybody sees.
No, that's fair.
But that's where I think it comes into play, because there's a lot of obvious ones that everyone sees, and it could even it out. It couldn't make it totally uneven. Maybe you're just a completely undisciplined team and you can't stay out of the box. For whatever reason, it just feels like there's certain things that are let go, certain things that are called, aren't called, whatever, And again, I think actually we can even tie this back in to the conversation we had, about a week ago when we were talking the Brandon Tanev hit. And again, it's the players are out there going, define a clean hit for us then, please. What can we do? What can't we do? This takes it to a much more basic standpoint where now we're talking things like stick infractions, things like that. We're not talking about body checks here. We're talking about hooking, holding,
the whole thing. But
what do you see? What do you see? Is it that obvious? Did it really happen that way? Is it worthy of a call? Was it on a scoring? Things like that. Anything like that. And now I think we're hearing this open admission about making a call, even though it wasn't that much, even though just to make a call. It's kind of like when you're rebuilding a team, or thinking about rebuilding a team, and we sit there and say, don't make a move just to make a move, actually make an impactful move. Don't make a call just to make a call. Make it a worthy call.
No, I understand that.
And don't do that to the game, because I think they're right. The key word in the statement was the integrity of the game. I think that's what it comes down to.
I also feel, though, that we do this in every sport, though. So now I'm coming back to we're human beings, right? So we're not robots, and this is what happens when you have human beings in play. You're going to have we bitch and complain about every call in the NFL. Oh, that's ticky-tack. Oh, that's a holding on the defensive player. Oh, back in my day, you could have this, you could take their heads off, this and that. So the game changes. The speed of the athlete change. That's huge. Like the fact that we now have to have people who can keep up with the speed of NFL cornerbacks and wide receivers to make the right call. We now need athletes to be able to referee. And look, these referees, they're up there in age. They're not 22 years old skating at the speed of Joel Farabee anymore, right? Like these guys are older in their career. They're veterans. They need to hang with these players. You talk about umpires. And I just feel if you look at the nature of sports in general, not just hockey, everyone bitches and complains about the refs in every sport for eternity. In all of human life, we have looked at referees, complained about their calls, not loved their calls. And is there a fix? Because I don't know if there is. I think this is just a part of sports that's always going to be there. And you can be better at it and all, but to expect perfectness, if that even makes sense, that's probably not perfect either. But if you could expect people to be perfect making calls, well, then we're living in La La Land.
I think there's a difference between, though, missing a call and making a call just to make it, though. No one's asking them to make every single call, and if they miss one, that's a problem. I don't think anybody's looking at it from that angle. I think they're looking at it the other way, where it was, if that was borderline a clean play, and now you're making a call, and your answer to the question is, I just had to make it, then I think you do have a problem, because now you're not. Now you're bringing gray area into what's a call, what's not a call, according to the rule book. If it wasn't really a call, and like you're literally admitting it wasn't that much, but I had to.
Yeah, but sometimes sometimes there are things that it wasn't a lot, but it was enough, right? Like, even if it's a little rub off, how many times have we seen an interference play where someone chips it into the zone? Maybe they're trying to establish a forecheck, and somebody comes in and maybe takes them out just for like a half a second to try and buy time for their defensive partner to pick the puck up and maybe try and make an outlet pass. And that was just enough. It wasn't a big interference, but just enough to interfere with the play that allowed. Like, it's so subjective, and that's the problem with it, where it's, hey, it might have been but that just enough could have been the difference in getting there first, getting the stick on the puck. So maybe if it's just a little, but that just a little could still be enough to justify making the call.
And that's fair. I think it's the admission of, like, to kind of admit it has to even out, though. If, like, I have no problem if it's not that much and you're making a call, because that could be either side and you can still level the game up. I saw it. It may not have been a lot, but I'm still calling a penalty because this is the way I'm calling. Like, that's the other thing I think people don't like when it comes to the game. You got to be consistent with your calls one way or another, in terms of, you're either going to call every time there's it was not much, but I'm calling it, or you're going to be a little looser with it and go, I better make sure it's an obvious infraction before I make that call. And that's the fine line that has to be defined also right away from the start of a game. And it can be different each game. You can have an official who on one night is maybe in there going, it's almost everything tonight, even the smallest thing, it's getting called tonight. At least be consistent from the opening minute of the game to the last minute of the game, and determine right then and there what kind of officiated game we're going to get. And that way, that's how it evens out too, because that goes back to what I was saying about, even if you're a team, you might get penalized 8 times that night, and the team might have 8 power plays as a result of that, because they're calling everything like that. And then if that's the case, so be it. You're having an undisciplined game, and against their determination, the subjective nature of what is a call, they're going to make it that way. And you might only get 2 power plays in return and it doesn't even out, but that's how it will go, because it's not about evening it out and picking and choosing when a penalty's called. It's an equal equation here, and it's just one team did better than the other. That's all it is. That's the way I think of it, at least. I don't think that there's any, I'm with you to an extent. I don't think there's anything that's out of the ordinary here. Like, I think it's been part of the game, but at the same time, I think that now you're going to have people who are going to go, now they have to look into this. How the officials call the game. And I think what it comes down to is just making sure that you are calling with some form of consistency and not worrying about whether or not it's an even playing field from each side. I think that's the problem. It's the admission of it was, I had to get a penalty in for that team. That I think was the glaring problem. It has nothing to do with, it wasn't much. It has nothing to do with anything like that. I think it comes down to, his words were, I had to get a call to Nashville on that one.
Yeah, but maybe and look, we'll move on a little bit here just because officiating can only go so long. But no, I mean, look, I feel I'm more passionate than I should be about it, because I do feel also I'm on the one side of, maybe the majority's on the other side and I'm on this side. Maybe I'm wrong, though. Maybe the reaction is there are a lot of people on my side too, but I also feel that maybe that has been taught to these referees. So if you're going to blame the one ref, how about we look at the big picture of, there's probably this referee clinic and all where people learn, hey, this is what you need to do in this league, and making it even might be, like, I wouldn't be surprised if they say at some point, hey, make sure that it's even for the most part and try and even this thing out as much as possible. And if they're informed that, then it's more of a culture thing with referees in general. But,
well, and it's perfect the way you said it, because I think it is a generational thing to an extent as well. I mean, you've got guys who have been doing this for however many years. I mean, how long, I don't know specifically off the top of my head, but how long was Tim Peel an official in the league? He's 54 years old. He's been doing it for at least 20 years, 25 years, right? So if you've been around doing it for that long, then now your influence rubs off on everybody else. Now, and not just rubs off on everybody else, but you're part of a group. Like, I think of Tim Peel in the same group as Kelly Sutherland, Wes McCauley, guys like that. Kevin Pollock's another one who comes up. Like, these guys who have been there forever, it feels like. They've been doing games since the early 2000s. We're talking 20 years worth of games that these guys have been, around. And if that's the way that one of these veteran officials is officiating, maybe the younger guys don't think of it that way also. Like, instead of being taught that in the clinics and the trainings that they have coming through the ranks or whatever, maybe that's not the way that they go about it. And it's just it's an older guy kind of thing, an older official kind of thing. I'm trying to keep the game even out here because, and things like that. But that's, let's put it this way. One of the key things when it comes to the officials is this type of stuff goes into who ends up being on the ice for the last game of the season. They do review them and then put the best guys out there. I'd say that's part of the problem as well. Like if you're going to have one of the top, or I don't know about top because that's arguable. I know a lot of people kind of didn't like Tim Peel. I would roll my eyes a little bit too, and I would see his name on a roster sheet for the game that night as well. But you know what I mean? Like if you have a guy who's been around that long and has the shot to get into one of those games, Stanley Cup final or whatever, you don't want that in the Stanley Cup final, I think is what.
Think about, I'm picturing myself now being a ref, and I was telling you this before. I got a couple buddies that are working and mucking their way in the in like the AHL and all, and refing in that in that league. But do you think? And we'll move on to some of the mid-level awards after this question. But do you think when you come out of that tunnel as a referee in Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Finals, like, you're juiced? You have that energy rush like the players do of like, this is the Stanley Cup, baby. Do you think that you get that feel internally of, damn right, I'm reffing this game? Like, I don't know. I think I never had that drive. So it's hard for me because I text my buddy afterwards or I talk to him. I'm like, when you leave that game, because he was a player forever, it's like, whew, I had 2 assists. Hell of a game today, right? Do you leave that game and you drive home, you're like, damn, I caught a great game. Like you just like, I caught a great game tonight. I don't know. I wouldn't go that. I wouldn't do that. It's just funny to think about.
I wouldn't go that far with it. But if you're talking about before, like at the beginning of a game, I think because most of them were ex-players who didn't make it that high up through the ranks as a player that now have made it to that level as an official. I absolutely think they get juiced like that for those games because it's still inside of them in that way. You know what I mean? Like it's still that energy level that you get for suiting up, putting on a uniform and everything like that. It's not that different. I mean, obviously they have a different role in the game, but it's not that different when you were a former player in one way or another, even if you were just a junior player, that there's an energy to it. So I totally think that.
I think it's so funny. Like, man, that second period trip, the way I put my hand up, that was just great execution. I just picture driving home from the rink, thinking about all my calls. But anyway, we'll move on from there. We'll move on from there. And I never thought, honestly, that we would ever open up a show just going all referee mode. But look, this is a hot topic, and this is not just a hot topic in the hockey world. This is the hot topic in the sports world because it's big with the officiating and where it's going.
As soon as that release came out, I knew I had to get it over to you, kind of like just to send you something like, look what happened with this, because we had been talking about it the night before, like the night that actually the clip was out there, and like that was such swift action too by the league. I mean, we're talking within the next 12 hours.
Something
after it was
tells
out
me
there.
He was probably like, you know what, I'm at. You know what I mean? I don't think that there was much involved.
There was a little hint to like that they'll end up, like, the league will end up doing him a solid for the games he's not going to officiate for the rest of the year and things like that.
Yeah, a little nod, little wink, wink, nudge, nudge kind of thing. Yeah.
I mean, like, he had a month left. He was a month away from retirement. I mean, and usually, like, this happens a lot with the officials who do, and this will be the last point we make on this. I know we're trying to get to the award thing. The league does this with officials a lot when they're retiring, is that they don't line them up for the playoffs. They set it up so their final game will be in the regular season. They get to just go off, and that's the end of their officiating career, essentially.
Right.
So he had a month left, and I think that also made it easier for them to do something outside of, well, now what? Like hypothetically, let's just say this was Wes McCauley instead of Tim Peel, and we're going, well, Wes McCauley's not retiring. He's respected around the league by a lot of people, and he's considered one of the best officials. But if that's the case, so what do? Suspend him? Fine him? Do you fire him?
Right.
Like how far do you take it? This kind of happened to be an easy solution because he was already retiring in a month. That's all.
Right. No, that's definitely another layer to the dynamic too. If this is a different person who's not retiring, things might change and all. But all right, why don't we get into the midseason awards here? And pretty much what we're going to do is run through the Norris, the Calder, the Hart, Vezina, just have a little bit of some fun with some of the options that are available for these awards at this moment, as teams are pretty much halfway through their season for the most part, a little bit more than that and all. But
I made it a point when I sent you this idea to check to make sure it was a halfway point for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it basically is.
I mean, I believe even the lowest games played for a team is 28.
Okay.
That's why I'm like, okay, for some it's a little bit it's plenty. I should say a little bit. It's plenty beyond. I just looked at it now. I didn't realize Vancouver has 37 games played already. Jeez. I
Yeah.
mean, they're way ahead in their schedules compared to some of these others. But mostly everybody's kind of hovering in the 31 to 33 range. It took a little while. I mean, there was a lot of teams that got there because there's teams that weren't at 28 yet that were still trying to get to 28 at the time. So that's how it kind of worked that way. But it was like, this is as good of a time. And that, sometimes in the middle of a week, it feels like every time we do the show for Monday, we have a ton of stuff to talk about because the weekend just brings out a bunch of different topics. And then those first few days of the week, because I don't know, maybe you can tell me if you agree or you don't agree. Mondays and Wednesdays are not exactly huge days on the schedule. There's not a lot of games going on, so you don't get a whole bunch of stories going into a Thursday show. So that's the difference too. So it feels like we needed something, and it's like, well, this is as good as a time as any to look at where we are at the midpoint. Not just among teams. We do that all the time with the teams, but now we can bring some of the players into it and best at their positions and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I agree. And why don't we start with the Norris, right? And I think as soon as, like, you even texted me a list of, like, hey, here's a couple one. As soon as you say Norris, like, my brain I think I even read Norris as Victor Hedman. You're like, why don't we talk about the Norris trophy? And I read it as, why don't we talk about the Victor Hedman trophy? But I don't know, like, and I was thinking, all right, so some of these might be a little easy, and some of these are like, well, he's the favorite. Look how great he's playing. And you can even look up the betting odds to see how close is the next person to even be involved. And, okay, so are we both in agreement that Victor Hedman is probably up there? But then you look at guys like, let's dive into like the 2, 3, 4 right now and just points as a defenseman. With Quentin Hughes, here's my problem with Hughes. I feel his plus minus is going to crush him here, considering I know that this is a scoring title thing, but when you are like he's like close to like -17 or something of that nature.
Yeah, that was what I saw.
When everybody else is plus, I think that's really going to crucify you here in this running.
Yeah, probably. I mean, well, damn, I thought we were going to have more disagreement than that. I mean, I'm with you. Victor Hedman's the best defenseman in the game to me. So, yeah, I kind of read it the same way. I mean, I did it this way. I actually made a pick based off of it. And yes, you're right. It might seem like an easy pick. Hedman's probably the easy pick. I mean, he's going to be a finalist this year. That's no question. I kind of picked and leaned on a dark horse in this thing, I think maybe. And I really think that Jeff Petry's got a shot at something significant here because it's not just, it's not just point production. Obviously he's ranked 4th in points. I believe he might have the most goals among defensemen this year. He's at 11. That's pretty high. I mean, maybe Hedman's right there.
The next one is Nurse. Yeah. So Victor Hedman only has 6 goals. He's got 27 apples.
Now, we'll see, and then there's the difference. Hedman's just dishing it off like he usually does, and that makes, all the difference in the world for that team because why not? I mean, look at who your teammates are, I'd give it to anybody else too at that point, and he's got a good shot in his own right, don't get me wrong, but you know what I mean. But I was just impressed, I think people by now, and this is maybe where I'm going with this, yeah, I know you could call it the Victor Hedman trophy in a way and say it's his and all that stuff like that. I just think that there's so many people who are going to start, and especially now that they won, there's so many people that are going to look at Tampa and go, well, gee, that's such a good team that they almost don't even need Victor Hedman to carry them anymore because they have, go down the list. Last year when they still had Shattenkirk anyway, like go down the list beyond that though too, like McDonough, Sergachev, there's a list of defensemen that go beyond him that still contribute in such a big way. I really think Petry's just emerged as one of the top defensemen.
I agree with you.
And that's saying something when Shea Weber had this like resurgence, kind of brought his career back. Den Sherratt's been a good defenseman for them, but that doesn't mean, I really think Petry stands out on that team, and he's
hurt with a broken hand, right? Because he got in that fight. Sherratt, didn't he get into a
Sherratt
fight?
Sherratt's out for a while. Yeah. But Petry's just so he's very poised. He's a steady defenseman. He's a good puck mover. I mean, the point total says a lot. And I don't judge. And I think I've talked to you about this before. Plus minus is not the end all be all number when it comes to determining how successful a guy is on the ice or off the ice or whatever. To be a plus 14 on a team that, isn't right at the top of the standings, isn't necessarily considered a huge favorite among the other teams in the Canadian division. I think that no matter what, you'd still have everybody going to the same 2 that are at the top. That's impressive. And I think that he's earned some really strong consideration.
I agree with you. He is my dark horse as well when looking at the list. And I also think some of this, well, are we giving Tyson Barrie enough credit? Because he's up there too as well. But
oh, no. I think we aren't giving him credit. Yeah, I don't think we're
yeah.
giving him enough credit at all. He was another one I kind of looked at. The only reason I started to not consider him is because there's two guys there. You know, like Nurse is having just as good a year. And it's like, how do you even differentiate who the best one on that team is, let alone now think he's a standout for a league-wide award? You know, that's the only reason I didn't go there.
No, that's a fair point. And with Petrie,
I don't think Hughes should get it either at that point in time, because I think you're right. Hughes is going to get hurt by the team performance and the, you know, while it's not the best, you know, recognition of what's going on in your season, the minus is going to be huge.
Yeah, I don't think he's there yet. Like, he's going to be. There's no denying when you watch his skill set. He's going to be at that level. And while his points are there right now, as he's third in the league in points for a defenseman, I still think that these other guys are just they're just more mature. They're more professional at it. They add that extra value to the team that brings that more professionalism to the squad, if you will. But with Petrie, I just wonder, because like Hedman, it's sort of like, I don't want to go to this level of it because Sean Couturier has been in the running forever, but there is this point of, okay, Marchand won it. Not Marchand. Bergeron. Bergeron's won the Selke. Bergeron's won the Selke. Bergeron's won the Selke. Okay, maybe Sean Couturier's been involved enough. Let's give it to him. Now, I'm not saying that's the same with Petrie, but I do feel like there is this, okay, we know it's Hedman. We know it's Hedman. We know it's Hedman. Who is another guy that maybe might be able to win it this year, because it's been sort of Victor Hedman as that guy for so long. So does this go back to the whole kind of like with the referee thing is, well, we call it kind of like not a makeup call, but we're going to lean in another direction to try and even things out a bit. Are we going full circle here by looking at a defenseman who, like, let's be realistic. Victor Hedman deserves this bad boy, but we're going to go in another direction to even things out.
I mean, probably. I don't see a name at the top of the list that stands out as a guy who's been around long enough in that conversation to then be, well, he should get it just because he had, like, the guy who I guess I would say it should be, you know, or that you could lean towards in that regard. I mean, I believe John Carlson won it. I don't think he has. Good
question.
Because he was like the guy last year, and then kind of the second half wasn't as good as the first half was, and Hedman just continued to be steady. I think Hedman won it, right?
I'm gonna look it up now.
Yeah, I wasn't
He finished second last year. It was Yossi.
Oh, Yossi won it. Okay, and Yossi was a guy who was always in that conversation as well, and was the one who got it. But like, that's my point. Like, and Carlson's ranked or tied with Petrie, with Drew Doughty for the same amount of points. But again, he's a -4 this year, and it's like, and everybody knows he's the top defenseman on that Washington team, at least in terms of playing time and all of that. So it's kind of like, what kind of year are you having then? Because Washington's not having that kind of year as a team. It's not like he's on a bad team. So the -4 is a little concerning in that respect. Just, you know, and again, it doesn't mean it's always his fault or anything like that, but it's not the defensive season he had a year ago, that's for sure. So I don't even know if you can give him that kind of nod, and then I just don't even see anybody who really jumps out as that type of guy. I mean, the only other name that I can look at that I sit there and I go, we tied in a couple of these other guys already. Like you mentioned Barrie, and I kind of said it's hard to pick between him or Nurse in that case. I mean, I guess you could look Dougie Hamilton a little bit here. I think the name that actually popped out.
I think that's too much of a jump. Like if you say Dougie Hamilton,
but
yeah, too much.
Like that's what I'm saying. So I said I guess. I mean, the name that actually kind of stands out to me in a weird sort of way is Sam Girard. Could be one that gets a little bit of consideration just because it's not always about the points. He's on a good team, and for a little while there, like I'd love to know where Cale Makar falls on this list if he didn't get hurt. You know, that's really the thing. Like, I'd love to know where he falls on the points list.
Is there anything better than watching him with the puck at the blue line where he shifts he like shifts his feet and he uses his body to fake a shot, then he'll go the other way and create this lane and rip a low risk shot that finds its way through three bodies, and it's just beautiful, man. He's one of a kind.
And that's why that's exactly why I pointed out Girard, because if Girard had to fill that role for however long and did it really well. I mean, Girard's a +15 and has, you know, it's one of the higher defensemen in points. He's got 24 points this year and played 10 more games than Makar did and things like that. It's just, you know, I that's the shame of it, is I think a lot of people thought Makar was going to be in the running, and why not? I mean, it's not to say his skill level's not there. It was he didn't play enough. Like, it's just he hasn't played enough games. I mean, he'd have to have a ridiculous final whatever of the season. I mean, where are they at now? They're at 31 games played, Colorado is. So
And someone
He'd
would have to have a
yeah.
downfall. Like Petrie would have to fall off because if
Or
Petrie keeps
Hedman,
up,
yeah.
right? If these guys play the way that they're playing, I think it's too much. So yeah, I think we're in the same category here. Though I think Petrie would be the good dark horse, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out for the second half. Now moving to the rookies. To me, people look at it as a two-person race and all, but I'll be honest with you, I don't even think it's a race. I think
this is
it's
over.
a lot. Yeah, Minnesota's got the rookie of the year.
Yeah, it's Kirill Kaprizov. That's an easy one. We look. I don't even feel like we need to talk about this because we've already talked about him a little bit before on a previous show, and it's but I'll just hit the basic points. He's been an outstanding player. He's dynamic. He's fun to watch, and he's quite possibly developing into a superstar. He could down the road. I mean, he's got that kind of capability, and I mean that feels like the only other thing that I will, and I don't want to go this far with it now because I think that the shift is going to happen, where he's not going to get enough time. But let's just assume that it didn't go this way or somehow he was getting the bulk of the work. Vitek Vanacek was a guy who was starting to challenge just a little bit because he was having such a good year. I mean, he's a goalie, so it's a little different. But I think that he was maybe the only other guy you could actually look at and go, that's a guy who is performing really well, giving you an awful lot in these games, and kind of came from out of nowhere. I mean, that's not to say Kaprizov necessarily came from out of nowhere or whatever. It's just there's really no challenger at any other position. It feels like there's just not really much of a challenger.
Ottawa would be the one where you might have
Stützle.
Right, but
sure.
Stützle, but I don't think that he's just not there. And that's the crazy thing is that has no disrespect to what he's doing. I think it just speaks value of what you're getting out of Kaprizov. That is so damn fascinating.
Well,
it's no knock on anybody else.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what wins it for Kaprizov. This is an easy one. Where's Ottawa going to finish in the standings? And look where Minnesota is. And
well, if they played Calgary every game, they'd win the Stanley Cup.
Oh, there we go.
It's so disappointing, dude.
Yeah, I know. Actually, where I was trying to go with that more is actually not necessarily standings position, but how many people have Minnesota making the playoffs this year? I mean, they're going to make the playoffs based on where everything is. I mean, they're 8 points to the good right now. And if they just keep up their current pace, they don't have to go on some crazy winning streak. They don't have to, they have a little bit of room where if they hit a little bit of a rough patch for 3 games, they're still in. I mean, you can't go much more than 3 games in a shortened season losing, but they carved out their spot and they're right. I mean, they're hanging right in there with Colorado and Vegas, and they're ahead of St. Louis. That's pretty astounding stuff when you think about where everybody thought the season was. I mean, basically when the season started, it was those 3 and who's the 4th, and it literally was that order. It was who's the 4 seed then, who's the team that kind of sneaks their way in, battles it out with the other 4 to get in. And it's not even a battle right now. Like that's who's going to make the playoffs quite possibly, So I think that's why he wins it.
It's crazy. I'm with you there. And when you're bringing up that division, I remember seeing this the other day, and I was almost blown away by it. Do you know that St. Louis, who's in 4th place in the Central right now, by the way, or excuse me, in the West, St. Louis at home is 4-7-3, and they're 12-4-2 on the road. That's pretty damn crazy for a good team. Like you're that bad at home,
especially when you consider, not to do tons of flyer stuff on this, but when Chuck Fletcher spoke yesterday and talked about the mental aspect of this year and not being able to do much, and you're trying, it's and how tough it can be on the young players too. Like, and that's not to say St. Louis is a young team, but this is where I'm going with this. You can't go and do anything. You go on the road, you're stuck. You're in a hotel room. That kind of takes away from the energy of it. So almost, and he tied it into, it was a good point because he tied it into the guys who are older, the veterans who have families, married, kids, all that type of stuff. It's like, they get their slice of normal when they're home. And it's like, that's what can be a refueling process for them, is that they get that. They go home from the game, they're home with their families, with their kids. That's what makes it work out. You know what I mean? And it's like, that to me seems like that's what the shocker is about that record is. That is what it is. Like that you get to go home, you get to be with your family, you get to do what you can in your area, wherever you're living. And instead you're telling me they're having better success when they get away from all of that and they just stay in a hotel room and probably play Fortnite or whatever. I mean, that's what Johnny said, right? Probably playing Fortnite or whatever. That's what all these guys are doing half the time. Like that's the ticket though for that team, is that they're winning games when they're away from all of the normalcy that they have, or whatever amount of normalcy they can get while they're home. That's a little unusual, especially for a team that was, it's still that Stanley Cup is still fresh. It's
Yeah,
not that far in the
maybe
past.
the business trip aspect of it intensifies of the level of focus because as you mentioned, you don't have much to do when you're in that hotel room, and before maybe you can go out, go to a nice dinner, hang out with the boys or whatever. And now it's more like, hey, you're just it's more of a business trip because of the environment that you're in. But I just thought that was interesting. We'll move on to a little bit of the netminders, all right, and what we have here with the Vezina, and this kind of goes back to. Very similar to Tampa Bay. I mean, when you look at the streak that Vasilevsky's on, how do you not give this guy the Vezina? But it goes back to it's boring. Do you give LeBron James the MVP every year? Do you give who's the I'm drawing a blank here on Tom Brady. Gee, I just drew a blank on Tom Brady's name. Think about that. But I was going to say, you don't give Tom Brady the MVP every year. It's not sexy. It's boring. Vasilevsky,
Right.
We're in the same thing, man. This guy just wins. The whole team is stacked. They go on this beautiful ride and all. The easy pick is him, but you could throw Grubauer into the mix. I don't think Hellebuck is having the same year that he had in the previous in terms of making that run again. But Grubauer and Vasilevsky, I think those are the two we can juggle.
All right, so here's the thing. 'Cause I wanted to go back and look at the previous winners first.
Okay.
So, because you're right, like you probably could have made the argument that Vasilevsky could have won it again last year, and then you're talking about a possibility of a three-peat year for him, which you're right. See, that's when it gets boring. I'm even looking through because I'm just trying to figure out like if there was, like Marty Brodeur won it back-to-back years in 03 and in 04.
Average goaltender.
Yeah, right. And then there was the lockout season. Then Kiprusoff won it, and then he won it again for 2 years in a row. But that's like pretty much it. Like he never won it beyond that, and that was well beyond the earliest years of his career when he was already established as an outstanding goaltender. Like you're talking about a guy who didn't win the Vezina in the first 2 years they ended up winning the Stanley Cup. And he was already known to be this outstanding goalie, right? Dominik Hasek won it 5 times in a 6-year span in the 90s. And then won it again in 2001. So he won it six times in 8 years. Nuts, right?
Yeah.
Even Patrick Waugh only won it 3 times. And again, it was 3 times in like 4 years, but you get the point. There's not really like that. The one thing that's been kind of consistent is there's giant gaps between when a guy is winning it one year and then winning it again. And I don't know if that's always necessarily a way of looking at how they've performed or just to try to give it some balance. I can't really tell. I mean,
it's
the last one that I can go
probably balanced. Let's be real. I mean,
sure, but
yeah.
I mean, the last one I can go back to, Tim Thomas won it in 2009 and then won it again in 2011. And I think it's obvious why he won it in 2011. But 2010 wasn't a great year. Remember, in the playoffs, it wasn't even him in the playoffs. It was Tuukka Rask that year.
Boston won it, was booing Tim Thomas out of town.
Yes, correct. So, all right, to actually answer the question, though, I think it's you gave 2 names. I think it's a 3-horse race. So I have Vasilevsky, and again, I'm going to agree with you. This is so boring.
I know who you're going to throw in there that I didn't.
Yeah,
put in.
Okay. Yeah, I know you already know.
Maybe. Is it Thatcher Demko? I don't know.
No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
All right. So, by the way, this is boring. Vasilevsky, I think, is the best goalie in the league, in my opinion. Okay, let's just move on because we're going to repeat ourselves collectively if we keep doing that. Obviously he's got to be up there. He's doing ridiculous things. I have Grubauer, and I actually kind of think Grubauer's going to win it. And I understand that. No, one of the points I saw made about this, and this is a good point, Grubauer's playing a much easier schedule than Vasilevsky is. Vasilevsky's playing. The Central's tough this year. When you're talking about most of your nights are against Carolina, Dallas, Florida's having a great year.
That's a little unfair. I'm not saying you're making that point, but to make the assessment that Vegas, Minnesota, St. Louis, these are tough teams.
Right. I think what they're going off of, though, is that, and it's weird to say this because Tampa, is a really strong, we just talked about, really strong defensive team, might have the Norris winner again, who knows. The argument is that Colorado allows like the fewest shots in the league or something like that. So he's having, and truth be told, I mean, go look at Colorado's stand like in the division that they're playing in the West. And you're right. For every time you play a Vegas or a Minnesota or a St. Louis, they're playing Arizona and giving up 13 shots a game or something like that. Like, it's really ridiculous how lopsided the shots are when Colorado plays Arizona or LA or Anaheim. And Philip Grubauer is going in and winning. I mean, he's either getting a shutout with 18 saves, or he's winning a game with 17 and 19 or 17 of 18 or whatever. His goals against is outstanding. He's got a 1.71 goals against, a 930 save percentage, and he's leading the league with 5 shutouts. But how hard has it been for him to do that when they're not giving up shots,
like if
or
you're playing,
or dangerous chances?
Yeah, but like if you're playing in the Central, you're playing Detroit, Dallas, Nashville, Columbus. Like I think you can make this. I'm not saying you specifically. I'm saying for the people that are looking at the argument of, well, look at the division they're in. Like any division, I'm scrolling through all of the standings in every division. There's the bottom 3 teams that are really hideous. Like, imagine being Toronto, like, yeah, well, you played Calgary a bunch of times. You are 15, 16, and 3, or Ottawa. And, like, I don't know. I just think if I'm looking through all these standings right now, there's a bottom 3 on every single division that suck. And all these teams have to suck is a little strong, but clearly not as good as the others. And I think every team deals with playing the top teams and then playing the poor teams. So I think it's a little unfair to justify it off that, in my opinion.
No, that's fair. No, I'll give you my third one because I know you're waiting with such anticipation over this.
Of course.
Marc-Andre Fleury.
Wow, I did not expect that to be the name that come out of your mouth.
I hear you, but like, go look at what he's doing right now. I mean, the only thing he doesn't have is maybe the games played, but he's played a lot of them for Vegas. I mean, you can't deny they've got 30 games played. He started 22 of them. And he's goals against is 193, save percentage 931. He's got 4 shutouts this year. There's a big difference there. And he's not only is he having an outstanding year, but I think the last thing we expected to see this year was he was going to come back into the spotlight. I mean, he was almost out of town, because of the Robin Lehner acquisition and all of that. He was almost out of town. There was a thought. I mean, there was talks that he was going to go back to Pittsburgh and be the backup there now to Tristan Jarry, because go back to Pittsburgh where it all began, all that type of stuff, No, he ended up sticking it out with Vegas, and now he's been more of a number one for them than the guy they signed in the offseason after getting him in a trade.
Yeah,
that's what's been astounding, and I think that's why he'll get some really strong consideration. I don't know if he's going to win it, but he'll get some really strong consideration. And you know what else too? I got to go and see about this. I mean, has he hasn't won one yet.
Oh, that's huge.
And I wonder if that's a Senate. Like you mentioned Patrice Bergeron's won the Selke. How many times? It's Sean Couturier's year. Is there a guy for this could very well be in that case? Vasilevsky's going to be winning it for years to come, and Hellebuck won it last year, and Grubauer kind of had it easier than other teams because the number of shots wasn't as high or whatever. It's Marc-Andre Fleury's year. It very well could go that way. I didn't think about it like that until you brought up the Selke type thing and how a guy who's been around it for so long, because you can't deny that he's been in the running for it before. He just has never won it. This could be the year.
Yeah, I think what you hit on, though, is going to be the downfall of it, and that's just the fact that he's not going to have as many games played. If someone's going to post up a save percentage or a goals against average that is going to compete with the Grubauer or a Vasilevsky, but they maybe not double the amount of games, but they have an intense more amount of games, I don't know if you can justify making that move, especially for Grubauer. If it was 2 guys like Vasilevsky, I think we can make that debate, but if someone like Grubauer's in the mix, that's that guy where it's, hey, it's not like he's a Vasilevsky who's constantly in there. He would probably be more deserving at that point. So it'll be interesting how it shapes up.
The only thing that I argue with that is Fleury's already 6 games away from playing half of Vegas's games. So it's not like it's going to be impossible for him to round out the year with the majority for that team. I think everybody knows that the goaltending situations are different for every team with these condensed schedules, that you're not going to have a guy, how many games does Tampa have played? I got to go all the way down here, of course. Okay, they have 32. He's played 25 of them. So he's only had 7 games off, but roughly double it. And say he finishes with, take 12 games off of the total. He plays 44 out of 56. If Fleury gets to, say, 37 and is within 7 of that number, knowing they have another guy who's behind him, it might be enough to still draw some stronger consideration, because 37 out of the 56, doesn't leave that many games for the other guy, and it depends on how often they feel like they can go to him. I mean, that's really the question. I mean, if they feel like they continue to stick it out with him because he's the guy who's given them the better chance to win, and he ends up with approaching 40 games this year, then he's going to have a shot, because I don't think anybody's thinking 40 games for any goaltender, just given the amount of games that everybody's playing in 4 months. That's what I think it comes down to. So, we'll have to see, but
Yeah, it's
It'll be
possible.
interesting.
No, you read my mind. I was going to ask you before you went into that was what would be like that separation level of how many games would Flurry need to play compared to the others for it to maybe be a conversation? And I think you're right. Like that 37 would be if 44 was in play for somebody else. If he was touching 37, is he at least in that frame? Yeah, I think that starts the frame.
Well, and let's put it this way. Here's a really good one. Let's go to, let's pick a team like the Islanders instead. And Semyon Varlamov is not in every single night. As a matter of fact, over the weekend, they actually played Ilya Sorokin back-to-back for the first time in his career. And no, there was a day off in between, so it's not like he went 2 nights in a row, but you get what I'm saying. So Varlamov has 22 games played. If his numbers were where Flurry's are, and he's not that far behind on a lot of these, by the way, but if his numbers were where Flurry's were, and he finishes with 2/3 of the games played out of 56, is it fair to give him a shot because of the fact that that's the style that the coach uses?
I don't think so. I think he gets hurt by it. Unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to do it for me. And it will come back to if Grubauer is a guy that is still keeping up his pace and playing significantly more, I wouldn't be able to do. And that's why a lot of people do question Barry Trotz's scheme. Does that impact the way that some of these players get looked at? Would some of these players have more points offensively? Because we know it's all about the D zone, the neutral zone, and then that allows you to pounce offensively, which is a great way to create offense. But there are some people that question, would Barzal be talked about even more if he played in this open style of play where, dude, go have at it, man. Have fun with that ice. Go create time and space. Instead of being so worried about the structure of it all, my point is, people do question Barry Trotz's scheme affecting individual stats, but at the end of the day, individual stats, I'd rather go win the damn Stanley Cup. So it's
by the way, I see completely why you thought I was going to say Demko, because Demko, no goalie in the league has faced more shots than Demko has, and if I'm going to find the guys that we just talked about, the 3 in particular, Vasilevsky's tied for 5th. I'm sorry, that's the same number, so tied for 5th. Grubauer's 12th, Flurry's 14th. Like, those guys fall at the middle of the pack. Now, granted, I think in order to even be in the consideration, you got to have a good defense in front of you, because that's what also helps you prevent goals, So,
sure.
At the end of the day, I think one of the biggest things, and maybe this is why, maybe this is another reason why it's hard to go against Vasilevsky. Vasilevsky's record is like 21-3-1 in 25 games. That's absurd.
Yeah, they're on a
tear. We'll never see that again. You know what I mean? Like,
I agree.
And that's not to say that Grubauer and Flurry aren't doing some pretty amazing things in their own right, but it might, Vasilevsky might be too good to not win this award. That's probably where I think you're going with it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on there. And then we'll end here as we're reaching into our 1 hour. Just real quickly, I don't think it's – we talk about the Hart Trophy, but there's one man, right? There's one man. Like, I'm just thinking, I know. Like, there's no way that anyone it's McDavid and it's Draisaitl up at the top with these points and all. But in terms of, like, anybody else even being relatively even close to competing, if, like, Patrick Kane is 44 and he's, not going to catch that, and Mitch Marner's not, and Scheifele's not. Dude, I'll tell you what, Mark Stone – are you enjoying this Vegas version of Mark Stone? And it's weird. Is it crazy for me? Like, I don't picture him as a locker room captain. I feel like he's like that goofy outgo. I don't know. He like when I see him out there, maybe it's the hair going around, but I see him as like a Scott Hartnell type of like energy, funny, goofy guy. His character, I see his character like a Hartnell, and I'm not saying it doesn't work because clearly this Vegas team's playing well, but I just don't see him as like your typical veteran captain. I see Chara as that captain. I see, you see guys as a captain. Everyone has their own personality to it. I don't see Mark Stone as this, like, traditional captain.
I suppose, he's a little all over the place in that sense. Yeah, you're right. I mean, personality-wise, it's definitely something to watch. He's a good player, though.
By the way, real quick, that's how far and away Connor McDavid is to winning the Hart, that somehow we bring that up, and we're going to Mark Stone being the captain, who's like not even close to the top of the list. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, because the only other name that I remotely heard was Patrick Kane, because he's having a good year too. But here's some perspective on how much this conversation has changed in a month. I mean, March is almost over at this point. So I actually just really quickly looked it up, and from the beginning of March, Patrick Kane's got 10 points in, I don't know how many games they are in March, but that's a decent number. I mean, you're still having a good go of it. But that means he came into March with 34 points and got to 44. Connor McDavid came into March. So I said 34 for Kane coming into March, right? So it was a race because Connor McDavid came into March with 40. But that means he's got 20 points this month.
Yeah, that was him on this. I think it was 9 games. He had 7 goals and like 20 points or something in that 9-game span, and it's ridiculous to watch him fly around. So yeah, to simplify our answer here.
No, I'll do this really quick then. Since March 6th, ready for this? 3-2, 3-3, 1-1, 3-2-2. That's, I don't know how many games that was total. It's 9 games and 7 multi-point games almost in a row.
If he's getting it's either he's getting 2 or he's getting none, right? There's like none where it's like, yeah.
There's not even games where he's getting none.
Yeah. Well, the only game that came to mind is because we had Johnny on every Monday show we do, but there was that stretch where they actually held Connor McDavid off the board, and we're like, huh, that's actually impressive, and they still lost that game.
There was one that they played Calgary. He got nothing, and then the next time they played Calgary, literally the next night he had 5, which might be the best. Oh no, never mind. He had a 5-pointer against Ottawa this year. So he said there's, I got a 4 and 2 5s among his season to begin with, and then I honestly don't even know how many 3s. I mean, there's
someone
2
scored
there.
4 last night. Was it Kopp for the Winnipeg Jets? Who scored?
Oh, you know what? I probably tuned out a little early on that one because I saw 3-0 third period and kind of just let it go because there was, I didn't realize he even finished with Vancouver scoring a goal. Kopp had the first 2 goals. I know that. I didn't realize they scored 3 more. Though Kopp had a hat trick. He had,
I think he had 4.
Scored he had an empty netter. He had 4 goals. Yeah.
Jeez.
Okay. I didn't. That's nuts.
It's a nice day at the office, Durso.
Yeah, I bet it is.
So was this, by the way. Today was a nice day at the office. Wake up, talk some hockey. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll wrap up really quick on the McDavid thing.
Yeah.
There was one point I didn't make on it.
Go ahead.
Because we just talked about him on Monday's show, so we don't have to go into detail on him. But he's the best player in the league right now. And I believe me, it took me a long time to come around on that to an extent. Not because I don't think he's good. I always was just on the, with all due respect to Sidney Crosby, who I believe was the best player in the world for, however long. He's number 2 now. This season has completely converted me on that conversation. It's McDavid. He's the MVP this year. It's not even close. These numbers are
individually skilled wise. Yes. When you talk about the little intangibles and all, is it bad for me to still hold on to Crosby when it comes to like leadership, bringing this like more professional side of things? Like, I think individually skilled, it's just, and no one can even make an argument that anyone is going to touch individual skill base. But in terms of best player in the league, is there, maybe I'm being naive here. Maybe I'm holding on to Crosby for as long as possible. But when you say the best player in the league, and maybe we can tease this into a future conversation, we can leave it with this question kind of is, does best player in the league, is that only individually skilled type of perspective, or is there a lot more intangibles that you can fly in there to make it a more interesting conversation?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, there certainly are, but that's, that certainly requires some significant thought because it can go a lot of ways.
Good thing we have good thought processes, Durso. So with that being said, look, I had a lot of fun today. As always, every day I have a lot of fun, Durso. That's the beauty of it. But thank you guys all so much for listening to this episode of Open Ice Hits, and we will see you early next week.